there. I'm going to do a little series on building a Raspberry Pi up to be the video controller for the Sexy Girl pinball machine. And so I thought I would start off from the very beginning. I have a kit that came from Amazon that Mike bought. This will be, I'm not going to do an unboxing or anything. Well, I'll do a little unboxing. I'll open this up just to show you, get my lefts and rights together here, just to show you that it's a kit full of other boxes, full of stuff, USB cable, Raspberry Pi case, power supply, SD card. So anyway, I'm going to take all this stuff out of these cases. I'm going to put them all together and check it out and make sure that everything works, and then I'll come back. And by the way, if anybody's wondering why I'm filming with a hat on, it's because I'm bouncing indirect light off the ceiling and it hits the top of my bald head and makes such a bright spot that you can't see my face. So this is the compensation for that. It's not that it's so cold in here that I have to wear a hat. Anyway, I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, I've taken everything out of their individual packaging, or at least most of the things, and I want to just show you what I have here. First, I have a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. I have a case, which is a 3-part plastic case that will hold the Raspberry Pi. I have a couple of stick down heat sinks to put on the Raspberry Pi before I put it in the case. I have a micro SD card and a holder for the micro SD card so I can put it in a USB slot to program it. I have a power brick, should be 2.5 amp. Yep, 2.5 amp power brick. And there's a little bit of a power brick extender with a click on off switch so you can power the thing on and off without unplugging it. And that will come in handy here because I've been having to unplug and plug it back in to reboot it. So I've got that going. So I got all those parts. I'm going to stick the heat sinks on, mount the thing in the case, and then I will take you to downloading the Raspbian software and configuring it for a headless display so that it'll directly attach to my Wi-Fi network and let me SSH into it so I don't have to hook a monitor up to it in order to get in and talking to it. Okay, I have mounted the Raspberry Pi in its case. That was a little fiddly, but it got in there. And I have taken the micro SD card and plugged it into this little USB adapter, and I'm going to plug that into my computer in a second. Now, this card comes pre-installed with Noobs and Raspbian on the card, but in order to configure it, you have to plug it in, hook up a monitor and a keyboard, run Noobs, and then tell Noobs to install Raspbian, and then go into Raspbian and configure it. But if you download Raspbian from the website, you can install it directly on here, and then you can modify it to enable SSH and the Wi-Fi capability without ever putting it into the Raspberry Pi, and then you can get in without having to hook up a monitor and keyboard, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to overwrite everything that's on here with the latest copy of Raspbian that's up on the Raspbian website. So let me plug this in, take you over to a screen capture so you can watch this work, and we'll see how it loads. Hello there. Really quickly, it's about a week later since I recorded that intro. I actually went through and tried to build the whole Raspberry Pi configuration, and toward the end of it I ran into a problem. This is my little STM32 tester that produces the serial string that I use to test my units here at home. And I have that's the same component that's on our little Bally to LED boards. With this Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, when I plug this into the USB port, it doesn't recognize it. After a lot of experimenting, I found out that it sees it. Internally, there's communications going on, but it never declares it as a device. I don't know why. I took the exact same SD card out of this, put it back in the Raspberry Pi 3B, and worked fine. I actually put it in a Raspberry Pi Zero, and it worked fine. But in the 3B Plus, it doesn't work. So I decided that since I have a 3B, I'm going to do this again, and I'm going to use the 3B as my the Raspberry Pi. Mike has ordered a new 3B to use, and I've opened a thing on a forum to see if I can get some help to figure out what might be wrong. But we're going to continue to use everything else that was in the kit, the case, the power supply, all of that stuff. We're just going to put a 3B instead of a 3D Plus in there for right now. So I'm going to start off with downloading the code. I'm going to start from scratch, and I'll do it all again just to show you guys what has to be done. Well, there are several different ways that you can download Raspbian software and flash it to your SD card. I have put the SD card in a adapter and plugged it into my USB port, so it is available to talk to. And I have gone to raspbian.org/software, and I think recently, I'm new to Raspberry Pi, but they've come up with their own imager. And you can just download this and it will do the imaging for you. No other software required. So I'm going to hit this download button. It takes a few minutes to download, or a few seconds to download. And I install it really quickly. And this is running in real time, so that's how long it took. Now, when I choose the operating system and it pulls that operating system down, that will take considerably longer. So for my operating system, this one would probably work fine, but I like to get the full version, which has additional software, so I just don't have to install it later. So I've chosen my Raspbian version I want, and now I choose my SD card. And it's the 32 gig card. Everybody always warns you, be careful, make sure you pick the right thing if you've got more mass storage in there, because once this starts overwriting, it's gonna wipe out everything. And it says that. I'm gonna write out everything. Are you sure I'm gonna wipe out everything. Are you sure you want to continue? Yes. Okay. Now this is gonna take a while. I will speed it up, and actually I'm gonna stop recording and I'll come back when it is done writing. As you can see, the download has finished and it's in the verifying process. This overall download and then verify takes about 20 minutes. So be patient, get a cup of coffee. It will do it. You just have to wait for it. But I figured I would take this time to explain what I'm going to do next. I want to make this Raspberry Pi so I can have it connect up directly to my Wi-Fi network and let me connect to it with a remote desktop or SSH connection. And all I have to do in order to do that is add a couple of files to this image before I boot it up. One file is SSH, and that's an empty file. The file name just has to exist in order for it to enable SSH. So you can use a text editor and just create a file called SSH and save it with nothing in it, and that's all that you'll need. And the other file is called WPA supplicant.
.config, C-O-N-F, and that file contains the credentials for the Wi-Fi network you wanted to hook up to. I already have that file created, and I will drag it onto the thing. I'll show you what the internals of it look like, so that you understand what you would have to make if you wanted to do this. When this gets done downloading, I'll have to unplug the SD card and plug it back in order for Windows to recognize it as a writable disk. And when it does that, then I'll be able to move those files over there. And then we'll move it to the Raspberry Pi, boot it up, and it should show up on our network. So I'm just going to let this run to the end. I'll speed it up a little bit. When we get to the end, we'll go from there. Okay, so that part of it is done. So we're done downloading the operating system. I'm going to unplug it, plug it back in, and now my Windows system should see that card. Let me show you something really quick. Notice that there's a G disk called boot, and there's an H disk that's not initialized, that isn't usable as a Windows drive. And that was a 32 gigabyte SD card I plugged in there, but there's only 252 megabytes in this usable G drive. Don't worry about that. It bothered me the first time or two it happened, but when Raspbian boots up, it will expand this drive to fill all the usable space. So you don't have to do anything. I think in the old days you had to do it, but now it's automatic. It just expands out. So if I open this drive, you can see there's a bunch of stuff in here. And all I need to do is drag my SSH file. Like I said, that's an empty file. And the WA supplicant file into this. And this is what that looks like. Of course, I'm blurring out my Wi-Fi network because that's my actual home Wi-Fi network there, and I don't want you to know what it is. But all you have to do, use a text editor, type this stuff out, save it, and then name it waSupplicant.config, and that's all you need to do. And at this point, by the way, I'll pop open this SSH with Notepad, just so you can see that it's an empty file. There's nothing in it. Okay, so I'm going to move this to the Raspberry Pi, hook power up to it, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, the SD card has been plugged into the Raspberry Pi. Power has been attached, it's been turned on. It should have connected to the Wi-Fi network, and now I need to figure out what IP address it used to do that so I can talk to it. The easiest way to do that is just to bring up your command line prompt and ping Raspberry Pi. R-A-S-P-B-E-R-R-Y, Pi. Ping Raspberry Pi, and it finds that you can talk to it by that name. I'm not sure what happens when you have more than one Raspberry Pi, though. I'm going to try that soon, but for now I only have one hooked up, and you can see that it's given the address 1.63, so I can talk to it using 1.63. So to connect to the Raspberry Pi, I'm going to use SSH. I bring up a command prompt. Come on. Type SSH. The username is pi at RASPBERRY pi, or I could put the IP address. I got a feeling this is going to fail because being SSH, my computer keeps track of when I talk to Raspberry Pi, and since
It probably has different credentials now that I've reloaded it. It's probably going to fail and I'm going to have to go clean something out. But I wanted to actually show you that in case you run into this. And yes, indeed it does. So you can see here it says that under user Edward SSH, this is the wrong host. So I'm just going to go to that location, see users, Edward without a D, .ssh, known hosts, and I'll just open this with Notepad. Okay, and there's a known host, and it's wrong. So I'm just going to delete this and save it. And now we'll try that link again. And now it says, I don't know this guy. Do you want to use him? And I'm going to say yes. And you have to actually have to type the whole yes out, not just the Y. And I am connected to the Raspberry Pi. Well, I'm connected. It's asking me for my password. Raspberry. Okay. What happened? I think. Okay, just mistyped it. So there I am. I am now, with those just couple of steps, I've got a network attached Raspberry Pi. Now I want to use a GUI Windows Remote Desktop to connect to the desktop on the Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to have to install a little software to enable the remote desktop applications to talk to each other. And you should always do an update and upgrade when you load new software. So I am going to do that also. Okay, I'll start by doing the update. Sudo apt-get update. So I would think that most of these packages are completely up to date since I just downloaded the latest version of Raspbian, but you know, it can't hurt to do it. And then sudo apt get upgrade. Is it dash full? It's actually full upgrade. And so this will make sure that every package that's on this disk is at its latest revision. At least I believe that's what this is doing. And now I think I have to install XRDP. And XRDP is the application that the remote desktop talks to. So this takes a little bit of time, but not too long. And once that is done, I should be able to use my remote desktop to get a GUI connection to this Raspberry Pi, and then I can work with that from then on, which is a little bit more comfortable. Okay, so with that, I don't think I even need to reboot. At least I haven't had to in the past. So I'm going to bring up my remote desktop connection, connecting to 63. And there it is. Username is Pi. Password is Raspberry. And there we go. So it's warning me that everybody in the world knows the Raspberry Pi uh, password and I should change it. And I'm going to say okay to that. Now this is going to take me through, since this is the first time this has ever been brought up, it's going to take me through the standard setup where you set your time zones and stuff like that. And as part of that, it's going to make me change the password anyway. So we'll step through this. I am in the United States, American English language, and I'm on the East Coast. So New York is a good East Coast place. I want to use the English language and the US keyboard. And I need to input a new password. Simple and easy for now. It's looking for all the Wi-Fi networks around here, and I'm going to keep ads. Since I just did the update and installs, it should all be up to date. And we are done. So this is the end of part A. In this part, we built a working Raspberry Pi. This would be what anybody would do who wanted to build a Raspberry Pi for any project at all that they wanted to build. Now in part B, we'll add the specific software that we need to make it usable for our project. So take a look at that. Thanks for watching, guys.